Brian, you mentioned something really from the heart about masking and your response from behavior analysts. And I'm wondering if you can say a little more about
Yeah.
masking
Yeah.
and
I'm going to see if I
how
can
that
link
might
that.
relate, bringing it back, and how it might relate to maybe tracking clients. But Brian, can you explain that to our listeners that might not understand that?
Yeah. So first I'll start with the layman's terms for masking, and then I've actually created a pretty okay operational definition. I say pretty okay because it can improve. And it is a little bit wordy and behavior ease heavy, but first the layman's terms. Masking is what happens when a person of a divergent neurotype from the norm, typically autistic, but not always, will suppress characteristics that are innate to them in order to fit in and to avoid being hurt, either socially or physically, or a combination of both. So that's the layman's terms version of masking. The behavior analytic term is separated into two core areas: punishment and reinforcement. So, and no, this, my memory is not this good. It's up here ready to rock and roll. I was thinking about it, this might come up. Um, so autistic masking is a class of behaviors that are in response to the contingencies present in neurotypical dominant settings, which result in punishment contingencies being delivered for any perceived abnormal behavior as defined by the group in spoken and unspoken rule sets, which results in suppression of said behaviors. This results in the behavior contrast, which typically presents itself in outbursts of aggression, increases in stimming, or even the individual desperately seeking isolation. Behavior contrast frequently results in private or ongoing family and trusted individuals seeing that contrast. Prolonged exposure to punishment arouses strong emotional responses, which results in behavioral repertoires that often are described with commonly used terms such as anxiety, depression, guilt, shame, apprehension, and self-punishment. Furthermore, prolonged exposure can increase self-injurious or aggressive behaviors or changes in topography to be more subtle or minor self-injury. Suicidal ideation is one of those results of that punishment contingency. But then we flip over to the reinforcement side. So in addition to punishment of autistic behaviors, there is reinforcement of normal behaviors that is immediate, that is imitated in a very thin variable schedule reinforcement. Even when attempting to mimic said behaviors, imperfections in mimicking frequently contact thick schedules of punishment. Furthermore, it's well established that sometimes reinforcement contingencies can lead to fatigue in the individual, leading to less effort being applied towards other behaviors that could be more reinforcing and or beneficial to the individual's well-being and quality of life, aka burnout. Derived relational responding leads to pairing of genuine self with bad, broken, wrong, inadequate, stupid, annoying, unacceptable, unaccomplished, shame, fear, and etc. Of course, the functions of this class of behavior includes all the functions, but it's heavily on the socially mediated side because it's all involves social. If the individual were to be left on their own devices or to be around people like them, they would not be encountering these contingencies. Sorry, that was really wordy.
No, but I actually think it's pretty good, and I like some of the, some of the efforts to try to contextualize some of these contingencies. And so take it back to your comment about the mentalism, and let's see if we can link up that little riff I went on to see if we can use a greater sensitivity to context to sort of unpack some of this in a way that isn't mentalistic. Could you explain just what you were saying earlier about your conversation?
Yeah.
With,
So one of the things that I see that we need to have, that goes back to that very first point that I made, which was we're trained to be technology deliverers, not scientists. Yeah. We need to engage our curiosity. Right. I've learned how to I've learned how to, well, relearned, I should say, how to be a scientist, because we all were scientists when we were 5. We all have that curiosity until it gets punished and suppressed, and we're told we have to fall in line. But I've learned that whenever I have an emotional response of uncertainty, of frustration, of anger, that's when I need to dive in. That's when I need to be curious and to dive deeper into asking those questions. Whenever I feel like my rules that I've derived for myself are being challenged, that's when I need to jump forward and figure out what's going on, not pull back and be protective. And so that I jump into that curiosity personally by start asking more questions, by start learning how to break things down. And the behavior analytic language, behavior ease, is in some ways really obnoxious, but I've also found it to be super effective for helping me to create frameworks, and then I translate it out of behavior ease into everyday speech. So that way it helps me to create that structure.
So if I could just unpack what you said, that, okay, so there's a detecting a private event that orients you towards a historical set of contingencies that, if you're not careful, leads to these kind of repertoire narrowing effects.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we call lack of curiosity, etc. But it, back over to the issue of masking, could include things with this repertoire narrowing effects that include trying to put on a persona in the interests of inclusion, of being part of the group and of not being cast out. If you catch it, you've learned that if you do certain behaviors that are somewhat contrary maybe to that one contingency stream, you can tap into another contingency stream that is actually quite positive. And I think that is the kind of example of what behavior analysts should be doing with behavior relations more generally, and with private events especially. Mm-hmm. And you do need some additional conceptual tools. Derived relational responding and equivalence is really, really important. But it's not spooky. There's nothing, non-empirical about it or non-natural science about it. If you do that, you can walk into the private world of your clients and, seek out tools that will, or kind of behavioral adjustments that will help navigate this space. And I think some of the things you're pointing to, like there's one that we might look back and write apology about at some point, that we've been actively training and encouraging masking in contexts in which it's absolutely not necessary. It is not helpful. It is not, and producing a kind of a constant aversive state for people. And where really part of what may need to happen there is more working on the social contingencies themselves, number one. Number two, finding other ways to be able to manage those challenges other than just suppression. Suppression controlled by aversives produce all kinds of bad effects long term.